Welcome back to Dreams of the Nameless, where sky fairy nonsense still permeates government in this dystopian moment.
A local Alaskan government meeting has made national news, and unfortunately it's not due to any particularly interesting news story out of Alaska. It's because the opening prayer was the wrong sky fairy. It was the wrong invocation to the wrong god, and people got upset and walked out. More specifically, in this case, it was a satanist, who was a plaintiff in a case brought by the ACLU against the Kenai Valley government, and which they fought this idea that you had to be a part of a local organization in order to say the invocation at the beginning of the meetings. The case, obviously the city lost, so the plaintiffs won, and so this woman stepped up and she gave her Satanist's prayer that ended with "Hail Satan," and people got up and walked out. Before we really get into talking about that specifically, I wanted to offer this brief aside in that one of the things that makes me really mad about this is the media coverage. Most of it that led the story, most of them that I found, led the story with something about how people are enraged and walked out of a city council meeting or whatever type of meeting it was. And yet they also go on in the article to mention that there were protesters outside who had come prepared, some of whom were from the continental U.S. here, like Nebraska, I think was one that was mentioned. So there was obviously enough lead up to this story that whoever was in that meeting, they didn't get enraged by the prayer and then stand up and walk out. Like, it was all an act. The people in the meeting who then got up and left, they were acting a role, and it was all a media show that was put on by these people to bring attention to this issue, essentially. And so I think it's kind of a fucked up, deceitful media coverage, and I hate that aspect of it. How do you feel about, I mean, am I wrong? Like, is this not conceited and constructed, or what do you think?
So are you saying they knew that the Satanist prayer was going to happen, and so they came anyway, specifically so they could listen to it and then make a show of getting up and leaving?
That's my argument. I mean, they knew about the court case, and then outside they already had protesters waiting in advance. They already had media waiting in advance. People had come from Nebraska and the Midwest of the United States specifically to protest this prayer. There was way too much lead up. Way too many people knew about it. You can't just suddenly get mad that, oh, this prayer came out of nowhere. Like, you knew about it. Don't fuck around.
Right.
Like, this is a show.
I agree with you on that point.
So, that being said, for me, I want to highlight the real point of the story is that it's this prayer, government prayer thing is a hot button issue that's always really bothered me, because most people don't know about it, or they don't think about it, or they support it, or they don't care, or some spectrum along the lines where our Congress, our Supreme Court, all the way down to your local city meetings are frequently opened with a Christian prayer or a specifically like non-sectarian prayer, and it prefaces the entire body of government with these religious precepts or this religious babble that it has no place intermingling with the otherwise secular government. Even people who are Christians who are really, really passionate about their faith will try to argue with you and tell you, like, oh, no, there is separation of church and state. And yet, our Congress begins their meetings by praying. And I've always found that to be really incongruous at the least, if not out and out just wrong and fucked up and total bullshit. So I think this story could be a starting point where maybe more people will be aware, but I think a lot of people are just going to ignore it and go, oh, that was interesting, and totally forget about it.
Yeah, I think there's two things, as I hold up one finger, math. There's two elements of that I want to remark on. The first one is, I think this is a good opportunity to also talk about the fact that most Christians will weep at you about the importance of religious freedom and religious rights. Oh! And then if an organization that is religiously opposed to them does anything, they try and slap it down. So I think the one that happened that we have talked about a lot of times over the years was the Satanist organization that wanted to have a billboard on a bus. Even though all kinds of communities allow churches and whatever else to put, happy Jesus time bullshit propaganda all over the place. But they will actively try and censor Satanists or Islamic groups, or I have seen them try and silence and censor pagans and other types of groups. And so not only is the idea of the separation of church and state a complete fucking joke in this country, the idea of religious freedom is a complete fucking joke, because neither one of those things exists. Separation of church and state was probably a poor choice of words in the first place. The state should be sterile of religion. It shouldn't be there at all. You don't say it. You don't talk about it. It's not fucking part of it. It shouldn't be there. It shouldn't be in our schools at all. None. Same thing is true with religious freedom. Either it exists or it doesn't. Now, I am actually in favor of maybe curtailing some of those religious rights, because religion is so poisonous and so dangerous. But as it stands now, you're supposed to have the right to believe whatever fucking idiot garbage that you want. And if that's the case, then every time they stand up and try and silence a pagan or a Satanist or a flying spaghetti monster advocate, every time they do that, they prove the hypocrisy of their own religion.
For me, the really gross thing is they'll also try to pull in this BS of like, well, we're a Christian nation. It's like, no, we're not. I don't remember, a lot from my middle school days and so forth, but I do remember American history and how we started tobacco plantations for profit. That was the point. And the religious groups that did come here, it was to escape oppression from the Anglican state church that was run by the King of England. It was a government religion that was oppressing them for practicing their religion. So by definition, if you're going to pull this bullshit line of, oh, we're a Christian nation, and that's your history that you believe, then you should understand that you are doing the thing that your ancestors left to be protected from. That's the
among
thing.
Other reasons.
Yeah, I mean, it's not so simple as like this is the sole reason. But that's literally one of the things that happened that caused people to come here, was the oppression of their beliefs by a state-sponsored religion. And that's what's happening here when Christians offer Christian prayers before government meetings and then get butthurt when somebody says, "Hail Satan."
Yeah, and to clarify, when I say I'm for sort of curtailing religious, freedoms in that sense, that's what I'm talking about. Is from their perspective, if we came in and said you can't pray before a fucking court case because it's not appropriate, in their minds that would be to curtail their religious freedom. And in that sense, I want to curtail their religious freedom.
Yeah. They'll probably even say it's oppression and that you're fighting the war against Christianity. And I just don't give a fuck about any of that. If we are to have a government that represents all people, at the very beginning, you must start with a government that doesn't specify a religion. It's not that hard, because we can't divide ourselves in that fashion. It's already unfair to people who don't have Christianity, and you haven't even gotten to the part where you're talking about government yet. You're just at the opening of the fucking meeting where you're praying. It's bullshit. Throw it out. All of it.
Absolutely.
I just can't stand it. The good news is there are some organizations out there that you can get some help with, and they'll help you fight your local government and on up to end this practice. And they've had some success, especially with the more local municipalities and governments, because ultimately, generally speaking, those institutions, they just want to keep the peace. They don't want to have a legal fight or a lot of media attention, because it's just a city council and they don't want it. They've got other things.
And of course, to any of our viewers who might have an opportunity, they can't stop you from praying at the same time, loudly, in protest. And I advocate that you should go do that. That's one thing that you can actually do to make the world a better place around you, is start a group, start an organization, start a protest, make it so every time somebody tries to invoke Christianity, inside of a government building for any reason, that there's somebody else there telling them that it's wrong. That's something you can actually do in the world that is a good thing. So go out there and do that. But before, leave us a comment. Tell us why we're going to hell. And hit that subscribe button while you're doing it.